Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Outsider Podcast, the top political podcast in all of West Texas. I'm your host, as always, Drew Landry, and to begin the episode, allow me to wish you and yours a happy Thanksgiving. Please travel safely out there, and then if you're gearing up for the Black Friday shopping, well, put on some football pads and helmet before you go. It will probably get crazy. There's a lot to get into, folks, and, well, just let's dive in. Let's start with the obvious here. Since the last time we met, there was an election, and Donald Trump won a second term, defeating Vice President Kamala Harris 312 projected electoral votes to her 226. Out of the battleground swing states, that were 7 of them: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, Vice President Harris needed to win the Great Lakes states, which were Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, to secure an electoral victory. But Trump won all of them. And in those Great Lakes states, those 3 of them, Trump won the popular vote very close, in a very close manner. He won Pennsylvania by about 120,000 votes, Michigan by 80,000 votes, and Wisconsin by about 30,000 votes. Those were very close margins, and due to the winner-take-all format, those states have, for securing electoral votes, well, Trump won all of those 44 electoral votes. Now, those 3 votes total were 44, Pennsylvania with 19, Michigan with 15, and Wisconsin with 10. And you can do the math on that. That adds up to 44. Because Trump won just one of those states, Harris's path to victory was essentially blocked. Despite the electoral victory, Trump does not walk into the White House with a popular mandate. Yes, he won the popular vote by about 3 million, but he did not get a majority vote. He got a 49.83%. So that means, a majority of the popular vote went to a plurality of others. It means that a majority of voters supported other candidates. And that's the difference between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans care little about popular mandates and govern as if they had one, whereas Democrats care a lot about popular mandates and wish they could govern. So that's really a key difference there. Just go back to 2000 for the example for that. There were many observers who felt that President Bush was going to govern with basically from the middle, whereas he didn't do that. So when we look at what President-elect Trump is going into, he's walking into the White House January with a Republican Congress and not securing a popular mandate. Does this sound familiar to you? Well, it should, because that's exactly what happened in 2017. Times have changed since then. Let's just remember that now. Because House Speaker Mike Johnson has full-on drank the MAGA Kool-Aid. All right? It's no bones about that. He's full-on into the MAGA movement. Whereas Paul Ryan, who was House Speaker in 2017, was not really that enthusiastic about Donald Trump. There are congressional Republicans who are already bending the knee and bending over for Trump, like Trey Nels, who claimed that whatever Trump wants, he's going to get. I mean, it's also Trey Nels who said Trump has a 10-pound brain. I mean, it's really tough to take someone like Trey Nels very seriously. I'd rather listen to Dan Crenshaw about that, who's the Houston area congressman, and as opposed to Trey Nels, who, well, apparently doesn't have a 10-pound brain. I mean, and that's just my issue with Congressman Trey Nels. At least make him earn it. I mean, come on, Congressman, make him earn it. Begging for his love is pretty desperate. I mean, at least, the one thing to say about Ted Cruz, who won a third term in a pretty decisive manner, at least you got to insult Ted Cruz before giving it up, But I digress. What will a second Trump term look like? Well, I like to look to history, and I turn to Grover Cleveland. Grover Cleveland is the only one we can really compare this to, and let's also note that the late 1890s are not the 2020s. That's a thing we need to really grasp with this. But it's the only true comparison and contrast that we can make to a second non-consecutive Donald Trump term. And so when we look at Grover Cleveland's return to the White House in 1893, well, he faced a recession. There was a tariff issue, and he left silver for gold. There was the Pullman strike, and there was a Supreme Court nominee that was rejected by the Senate. His name was Hornblower. That's the real name. And all that was before the 1894 midterm. It's a pretty rocky first 1.5 years in the White House. And because of all of these issues that Grover Cleveland faced, and because of the bad policies that were set in there, Democrats lost 127 seats in the House of Representatives. No, they didn't have 435 at that time, but let's note that 127, no matter how many seats are in the House of Representatives, is a lot. And that is a record that has yet to be touched. Okay? No other party has lost that many seats. Let's also look at it from the other side, from the Republican side. No other party has gained that many seats in the House of Representatives. So as we think about what the midterms could possibly look like, if you're a Democrat thinking about 2026, you have to be thinking in terms of, hey, now would be a good time for us to really think about things, because guess what Donald Trump wants to do in his second term? Tariff reform. He wants to do tariffs. And people like to vote according to their pocketbooks, and if the tariffs that Trump wants is what Congress gives him, and let's just also be honest here, it's pretty clear that the president-elect really doesn't have any idea how tariffs work. Like, he legit thinks countries pay for them. You just have to roll your eyes and think, did he pay attention in economics? And you think with a guy who graduated from the Wharton Business School did, but anyway, if these work out, if he gets the tariffs that he wants, and what happens with that is that they'll raise the prices on economic goods, then let's understand the GOP will pay the political price for that. Let's make clear what I'm saying here. Republicans are owning the governing of the federal government. They're going to walk in with a majority in the House, a majority in the Senate, and they're going to have the presidency. They can't really blame much on the Democratic side. Democrats can really take no blame for what's going to happen, or really any credit for what's going to take place, unless they add on and something turns out to be good. That's how politics work. So let it be known that Democrats are going to have to be ready here for 2026, for that midterm. These next 2 years are going to be vital for them, as they need to prove that Republicans can't govern. And whatever that they pass, whatever it may be, is going to be bad for the American people. Trump will be forceful, as we know that he is, and he'll want to get his way. But when they're bad, we know what he'll do is that he won't take any credit, he won't take any blame for it, won't take any responsibility for it. And Democrats are going to have to force Republicans to take blame for it, to be accountable for it. And I want to make clear that Democrats who don't typically have a spine have to force Republicans to eat the lunch that they carried and defeat them on that in 2026. And that's, much like would have happened in 2018. Republicans don't have a large mandate in the House of Representatives. They're going to have a majority, sure, but we've seen here when Republicans have a majority, at least in the last 2 years, they've had a pretty tough time governing. It's actually Texas Republican Chip Roy who said, what can we tell the voters that we've done? What have we done with the majority? A lot of the things that have said in response to that particular question, well, Democrats have the Senate, so it doesn't really matter what we would pass. They wouldn't do. There is some credibility to that particular statement, but you pass things anyway. All right, you want to show the voters back home that you've done something. And it's just pretty evident that in a lot of ways that they haven't. So here now the Republicans walk into what's called a governing trifecta, and if things turn out well, hey, they're going to add to their majority. If they don't, then Democrats have to make them hold them accountable for it, tell them how bad things were, and make the Republicans eat the lunch. But here's what we have to remember is that especially Donald Trump, he doesn't take any responsibility for anything. All right? He still doesn't think he lost 2020. Like, he's still living in that weirdo world that somehow 2020 was stolen from him, which I don't understand how that could be. And he still refuses to accept any sort of responsibility for January 6th of 2021. Now, most voters still think that's a pretty big deal. Obviously, they didn't think about it in this particular election. But what's interesting is that Trump isn't going to have any responsibility for this while he's president because of a DOJ rule that you don't prosecute the sitting president. And so that's why Jack Smith, who is the special prosecutor, the special counsel, looking into what happened in January 6th, the election subversion, and basically dropped that particular case against him. He said, we're not going to really do this right now. We'll wait till it's over, and we'll see what happens there. Let's also face a reality here. Donald Trump is probably going to want to pardon himself on day 1 or day 2. All right? And once he'll do that, I mean, look, I'm facing a reality here. I'm just calling what I think is going to happen. Could I be wrong? Of course I could. I don't have a crystal ball. And if I did, and if it worked, why would I want to do this? I want to know the lottery numbers so I can, win the millions of dollars, and then, you wouldn't see me again. But I'm just basing things off of what I know of Donald Trump and what we all know of Donald Trump. I mean, do you really think that he respects the institutions of Congress? I mean, we know, based on the recordings of after, the 2020 election, that he tried to get people to find votes for him. So what makes you think he's just going to be like, I don't really think much will happen once I'm out of here? I mean, Democrats tried to impeach him in 2021 before he left office, and had the impeachment trial after he was out of office. So what makes you think that he's going to be like, oh, well, nothing will happen when I'm gone. It'll be okay. And the attitudes and what he has said about the Department of Justice, the whole idea of weaponizing the DOJ, do you really think that he's not going to pardon himself? I mean, I'm in the midst of thinking that he's entertaining the idea. And now, he had weirdo Matt Gaetz. That was his first pick to be the Attorney General. And come on, you got to think that was a joke. I mean, Trump really thought, I guess he thought that was going to really take hold. No. So that's not going to happen. That's actually a good thing for the country. Matt Gaetz needs to go away. Let's just be clear about that. And Gaetz has said he's not coming back to the House of Representatives, so there'll be a special election held for that. That's per the Constitution. So the Governor Ford is going to have to set up a special election in 2025 for that. And it's a pretty heavily Republican seat that's in the panhandle of Florida. It's a very conservative area. So it's pretty clear that a Republican will hold that seat. Gaetz probably just needs to go away. All right? Let's just be clear. He's got so much baggage, not even Trump can handle it. All right? That's a pretty big deal. If Trump, who has very clear baggage, if he can't handle it for you, that's a problem. So he's got a new Attorney General coming in here who also shares the idea of not weaponizing the DOJ. The responsibility that he's going to show here is, well, I'm just going to, pardon myself. Or perhaps the DOJ will say, we'll make sure all these particular things, all these particular cases against you are going to go nowhere. And I think that's what's going to really happen here. But I don't think we can just simply iron out, simply just rule out Trump trying to pardon himself. I don't think that's it at all, because we know Trump's character. All right? But, let's also understand this too. Trump never accepts responsibility. Never. Everything is always someone else's fault. He's a petulant child. And he always wants to come up and say, oh, well, poor Donnie, everything's against me. Okay, everybody's wrong. I'm always right. And why does everybody hate me? If you hate me, you hate the country. I mean, that's what he says. I mean, come on. Look, Donald Trump, let's just be clear here. Nobody forced you to have sex with a porn star and pay her hush money. Okay? Nobody forced you to do that. Just like nobody forced Bill Clinton to have the issues with Monica Lewinsky. Nobody forced him to do that. But it's different because, well, he got impeached for it. And it was consensual. And he lied about it under oath. All right? There's a difference here. You continually lied about all these things, and you used campaign money to hush it up, to make it go away. That's a problem. And so did a court in New York who thought that that's probably a problem. That's a felony. Now, look, I love this country. And I wish the president-elect well, unlike what Rush Limbaugh did to President-elect Barack Obama. Rush Limbaugh goes out and says, I want him to fail. You can find the audio. But I also want the hopes and the rights and the civil liberties of the people who disagree with President Trump to be respected. All right? And I don't really just want the Elon Musks of the country to, who, let's also know that Elon Musk is an idiot. But I just simply don't want their rights to be respected. I want everyone's rights and liberties to be respected. And does Donald Trump really want that? We'll find out here in this second term. I have my own ideas. I think you know what they are. But I think this is going to be an interesting 2 years. And we'll see if the Republicans in Congress are going to do anything. Based on what we saw from the last 2 years in the House, we'll see. Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't like to govern, she likes to whine. She wants more cheese with her wine. She likes to complain about everybody. Does she have any sort of backbone to actually put forth any serious policy? I don't think so. I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene is a serious person. I think she's a wackadoodle. But she gets the media attention, and she's a distraction from the Trump agenda. She is always reactionary. She's always a distraction. And until she learns how to wear grown-up clothes and not dress like Cruella de Vil, will she ever be taken seriously inside the halls of Congress. I feel bad for some of the people, for some of the Republicans there, that she's on your team. I really do. But, whatever. I'm not there. And from a bird's eye view, all we can really say is what policies will they give President-elect Donald Trump? We'll have to wait and find out. And if it's not good, if we see prices going up because of tariffs, average, everyday, middle-class Americans might be ready for a change come 2026, and Democrats have to be ready for that. All right. Let's move on here to another topic that I want to get in with you is the school voucher movement. And I, self-high five, will be presenting about this at the Texas Community College Teachers Association's February conference in Houston. All right, I'm going to be presenting on the upcoming legislative session, and you better bet that school vouchers is going to be an issue. That's going to be on the menu. Now, I do want to take just a small moment here and explain to you yet again, as I have many times about in the newsletter about all this, dealing with the whole school choice thing. School choice is a word. It's a focus group coined term. Okay, let's just be clear about this. School choice is a focus group term that has emerged to argue that somehow, and it wants parents to feel trapped in the education world. And they have utilized here an economic term because it's economists who are arguing this. It's economists and politicians. All right? It's not educators. It's not people who have an education background who argue this. And I want to be very clear. And I've written this in the Lubbock Avalanche Journal, in the Amarillo Globe News, in the Dallas Morning News. I've written about this. And it needs to be as clear as possible that school choice already exists in Texas. You can see that happening in Lubbock, Texas. You can see that happening in your bigger cities. When a city that is Lubbock size or larger, or even just, you could say even 100,000 people in it, whether it's Wichita Falls, Abilene, Midland, Odessa, San Angelo, Plainview, even Plainview, Waxahachie, I may have said that wrong, but there are more schools in that area. There's more than one school in that area. And so if you live in those cities, you have the actual choice of going to whatever school that you want to go to. Parents have the ability to take their child to different schools. What is not going to happen here is that you may have to pay a transfer fee. And okay, fine. What economists, going all the way back to Milton Friedman, want is that they want a free ride at the expense of the taxpayer. That's what they want. And what that comes in is usually some sort of what's called a school voucher program. Okay? So this whole talk about school choice, and you're going to hear it. If you haven't heard it already, you're going to hear it several times. School choice, school choice, school choice, school choice. It already exists. It already happens. All right? It's an it's a focus group term done by the far right, done by people from Betsy DeVos, that goes all the way, it traces all the way back to Milton Friedman's arguments in the 1950s and 60s. Okay? This is not a new conversation. It's just labeled differently. I mean, this is why, the right will still bring up global warming when the left wants to say climate change. It's a different words that mean the exact same thing. That's what it is. Okay? That said, let's understand that I call them school voucher programs because that's what they are. If you're going to give me public money that I can utilize in a private way, in other government programs, the right would call that a handout. Okay? But in this particular realm, they call it school choice, government-funded school choice. Well, they don't want government-funded in there. They want just school choice. And it sounds good. It legit does. But what they don't tell you, what the people on the right don't tell you about these school voucher programs is that if you utilize that and you go to mainly a private school, which most school voucher recipients do, there's tons of evidence on this. I'm not saying anything that hasn't already been said. All right? So with most of those recipients going to private schools get to pick and choose who they accept. And there's a lot of applicants who may want to go to that. So guess what? The schools choose. That's the real school choice. Schools get to choose who get to come in to their schools in those private schools. They get to choose them. So let's be clear. What is the real school choice? All right. I can spend another 30 minutes on that. I won't. But this whole talk of school choice is pretty ridiculous. Okay? And it needs to be called out. And I have. And I do every single time. Every time I make it clear that it's a school voucher program. I never call it school choice, and I never will call it school choice. The advocates for school voucher programs want it to be called school choice because it polls better. That's the truth. That's the truth. So there will be some sort of a school voucher program in this upcoming session. I don't think that's shocking news here. But what Texas Governor Greg Abbott wants is what's called an education savings account. And how this would work is that he wants some sort of universal savings account. Is that there'd be some sort of a program, of a funding of X amount of dollars, and it'd be a new account set up, probably through the controller's office, and that every parent would get X amount of dollars. And you would utilize that money to pay for your tuition, to pay for your school uniform, to pay, maybe you may have to buy a book, and that would be it. Let's also, there's another caveat to this. The tuition would benefit from this. Well, it doesn't pay for all of the tuition. Okay? It doesn't pay for all of the tuition. So because private schools will have a tuition that could be $30,000, $40,000, that's almost 100% more than what they're going to give you, than what these voucher programs will actually give you. They don't want to tell you that. But at any rate, State Representative Brian Harrison out of Midlothian, and Lizard Man lookalike Vance Ginn, who's from the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and he's got his own consulting firm, and he's taken up this fight. He's funded by Betsy DeVos and all these other right-wing PAC groups and think tanks and all this stuff. They love Lizard Man Vance Ginn. These two co-authored an opinion piece in the Dallas Morning News calling for universal school vouchers. And they wrote the proposal that the new proposed voucher bill must avoid what they called poison pills. Now, that's a political science term that means you put something, it's an amendment that's added in, or it's some sort of a program added in that is meant to kill the bill. All right? And so they say here that, and this is, quoting in part from their piece, that the proposal must avoid poison pills like mandated testing or regulations interfering with private and homeschooling choices. Government schools, that's another focus group term. Public schools should not hold harmless funding to cushion them from accountability if a student accepts an ESA. They should not be rewarded with additional taxpayer dollars if they fail to keep students. Folks, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. Give them credit for that. They're not even hiding it anymore. They want public schools to fail. They would look at what's happening with Lubbock ISD, and for those of you around the state who don't really keep up with the happenings of Lubbock ISD, let's understand that what's taking place over here is that there's a lot of discussion about potential school closures and school consolidations. They would salivate at what's happening with Lubbock ISD and view that as a market issue. See, what Vance Ginn and Brian Harrison and Governor Abbott and Dan Patrick and all these other right-wing puppets, they love when public schools fail. They love when public schools close. All right. And they feel they can do that because teachers don't vote, and when they do, they don't vote their interests. Okay? If teachers voted for their interests, there'd be a lot more Democrats elected. Let's just be honest about that. But they feel that because teachers don't, that they can do this, and they won't lose an ounce of support. That they will never lose an ounce of support. Okay. And until there's no schools in that community, will finally people realize what's going on. Okay? And as gross as that is, and believe me, it is, there is some good news. How is the school voucher movement taking place nationwide? Well, there was some cold water poured on it, to be honest. And in the 2024 election, in states like Colorado, Kentucky, and Nebraska, 2 of those 3 states voted for Donald Trump, by the way, in large numbers statewide. Those same voters voted against a school voucher program when it was put on the ballot. They had a statewide referendum, and it failed miserably. Since the late 1970s, voters are given these choices. When they routinely reject them, almost always. It's been a handful, maybe a couple of times since the late 1970s. In almost 50 years, folks, in almost 50 years, only been 2 times that a school voucher program has passed, when given a statewide vote. So what we can say with a great deal of certainty is that school voucher programs are unpopular with voters. Yet somehow they're well received among lawmakers. So what do I make of this? When we look at the March Republican primaries and the Texas legislature elections here just earlier this month. Well, let's understand one thing. Governor Abbott did not campaign on school vouchers. That was not his issue. It wasn't. Go back and look. And I wrote about this. Quorum Report editor Scott Braddock reported on this. Abbott, who used his money, went into those Republican incumbent districts. Okay? And he campaigned against them. He funded their challengers. He didn't campaign against them on school vouchers. He used something that they supported. He used immigration and border security. That is an issue, dear folks, where all Republicans agree. They voted with his issues. They gave him what they wanted on immigration and border security. They didn't fight him on that. They fought him, the 21 maverick Republicans, 5 of whom didn't seek re-election, fought him on school vouchers. And he went into their districts and said they're soft on the border. And they paid the price for it. So was public education actually on the ballot? Yeah, it was, but it was an invisible. It was a non-issue. Voters heard, oh, well, Glenn Rogers is soft on the border. I can't have him back. Went after Stan Lambert. Went after Drew Darby. You know? Went after Steve Allison. A couple of those guys won. A couple of those guys survived, like Lambert and Darby. They're still around. They're going to come back for the 89th session. But Glenn Rogers and Steve Allison aren't. Because they heard Governor Abbott say that they're soft on the border. When in reality, they challenged him on school vouchers. So he disguised it. Because Abbott knew that if he went in there and talked about vouchers, the voters weren't going to care about that. All right? There's enough polling to suggest that voters care about public education about 2%. That's not really a motivating issue. But that's voters across Texas. But Republican voters cared a lot about border and immigration. That's what they cared about. They didn't care about vouchers. So let's go into their districts, say that they're soft on the border, and we'll get the ones who voted against me on vouchers. So while the voucher movement may have taken a cold shower this past time, let's know something that's very clear. Here's another big issue, is that one of its main nationwide speakers, Corey DeAngelis, who is a Betsy DeVos puppet. In case you don't know who Betsy DeVos is, Betsy DeVos was the Secretary of Education under Donald Trump in the first session. In his first term, in his first term. Let's be clear about this. Betsy DeVos knows nothing about education. She was a big donor to the Trump campaign, big donor in Michigan Republicans' campaigns, big school voucher advocate, and she still is. So she's a multimillionaire, and so she wants to go across the country and advocate for school vouchers. And she employed Corey DeAngelis. I mean, the money's there. I mean, you just got to search for it. I'm not saying anything that's false here. But Corey DeAngelis, as it turns out, well, he lived a different life. And you can Google Seth Rose, and if you do, well, make sure you got Safe Search on there. And I think he may be persona non grata among Republicans. Because everything that he said about public schools, woke, promoting a gay agenda, woke, wants your children to read gay books, all this stuff, all the trash that he said that public schools want to do, he performed all those things in particular movies. Yeah. So you can't really trust Corey DeAngelis. You got an easy comeback, an easy killer every time he wants to post something about you. You got something on him on that. So he's not exactly somebody you really want to talk to. And then you get back to Brian Harrison, who went on Dallas area media and said that the voucher bill is not a done deal. So even though Abbott celebrated all this, and you got, he publicly went and said, "Oh, this is going to happen. We're going to," and this is the number one agenda for this session, along with Lieutenant Governor Patrick. Number one agenda: school vouchers. Well, now you got Harrison who's saying you can't count the chickens before they hatch. What is happening here with the school voucher movement? A lot of cold water on it right now. And let's also know that he's got a point, because we don't really know what the bill would look like. And I've often said this, while the issue is something that they can all agree on, And it's been a Republican Party platform issue for years. And I'm not talking just in the Republican Party of Texas. I'm talking about nationwide. Some version of the bill probably will take place. Some version of a voucher program will probably take place by the end of this session. I think it's a matter of asking of when, not if. But how long will it take? That's what when means here. Is it going to come at the very end of the regular session? Will there be special sessions for this? I often like to point to something that needs to be very clear here, is that take property tax relief. That's been the white whale of Texas Republican politics since they took power. We're going to do property tax relief. We're going to do it. Well, they did reforms in 2019. Now they're doing relief. Okay, fine. But they couldn't even agree on that. It took them one regular session, a special session, and another special session. Folks, it took 200 days. Special sessions are 30 days. First special session in 2023, House stayed in session for 4 days, gavelled out. Senate stayed in session the rest of the time. So we're talking close to 200 days where they couldn't even agree on what the solution was. So what details will they get hung up on? So I'm pretty much convinced that this session is either going to be the voucher movement's Alamo or San Jacinto, and that's going to begin in January. Deals were rejected by voters in Colorado, Kentucky, and Nebraska. They are popular among lawmakers, and that will be reflected in some way in this session. Okay? Last thing I want to say here, last thing I want to get into, and some of you across the state may not really care too much about this, but there's this spring football league, professional spring football. It's called the United Football League. Okay. The United Football League is a combination of the old United States Football League. That got re-upped again. And with the XFL, the Extreme Football League. Okay, the USFL and the XFL combined. They merged. And they're looking for a new city. It's called the United Football League. They're looking for a new city. Looking to expand. And I'm excited about that. I don't know if there's a Austin team or not, but I think this is the time for a city like Lubbock to get involved in this. All right. Lubbock continually misses out on pro sports. Like, they don't care about baseball, and so I'm the only one west of I-35, well, one of the few people, who continually beats the drum for some minor league baseball team. It doesn't matter what the team is. Let's move your AA team to Lubbock. This is a city that could use that sort of continual revenue. 77 games a year. Yeah. So they play 154. Maybe, yeah. I got to do the math on that, but Lubbock misses out on that because the leaders don't really value that. They don't care about it. There's a semi-pro, minor league, whatever, I'm not sure what they are, but it's a soccer team. Soccer. It's the Lubbock Matadors, and that's cool. But if we really wanted to generate more revenue for the city, leaders need to jump on this opportunity for spring professional football. Let's see, could good spring football survive and thrive in the hub city? Why not do a little bit of search on this? Why not take some time for the city manager and all the other, minstrels who are part of that city, trough, who make 6 figures a year? Why can't they do a little bit of due diligence research to see what, some sort of impact study? What would that do? What would that hurt? Now look, I know. I'm barking up the wrong tree. I want creativity in the city. I think, Lubbock needs to host, WWE live events. Lubbock needs to host MMA live events. And I'm not talking little rinky-dink things. I'm not talking about, house shows that they just suddenly come in and they're there. I'm talking about big, like, WWE Raw, WWE SmackDown events that they can work with Texas Tech to host it in the USA, in the United Sports Arena. Have a big concert at the Jones. I mean, that's what happens at Hodge Stadium up in Amarillo, or down in Midland, when the Rockhounds or the Sod Poodles aren't playing in the season. They're still having events there. This is just a revenue. A revenue spring waiting to be tapped. This city has so much potential, but they get wrapped up in these silly arguments about the dumbest stuff. And I've talked about this before. I don't need to revisit any of that. But let's just be clear. I know that when I start talking about more things for Lubbock to do, then that's people just roll their eyes and go, whatever. Drew wants sports in Lubbock. Yeah, I do. What's wrong with that? Why is that an impossible thing? Nobody can really tell me. All right, friends, that's all from me. Throw me a follow on X. Drew L. Landry is my handle. I'm on Threads, drew.l.landry. I'm also on a Blue Sky, drewllandry.bsky.social. You can just do you can just go to those apps, search for me on there, throw me a follow, and maybe I'll follow you back. Who knows? It's always good to spend some time with you. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.